Hi everybody, it's Monday. It was Rosh Hashanah last night. So I have been contemplative. Yes, it's gonna be one of those videos. You can tell by the title. And Midna and Zelda are there on the chair looking adorable. The chair's out of place. Everything's kind of discombobulated. So the shot is a little different because my husband and I got Gears of War, which I was holding off on playing for various reasons, but then I thought, okay, now's the time. And I said to my husband, the new Gears of War is out? He's like, what? And we went out and bought it. And I don't play that many AAA games anymore. And it's, before I get into it, I won't forget, this probably won't get demonetized, but I never know anymore. Patreon, you should become a member. Patreon, yeah, because it's fun and because it's a more stable source of funding, so I can talk about the stuff I want to talk about instead of chasing the YouTube algorithm, which I refuse to do. So, Gears of War, after, about 3 hours of playing it, it's a solid shooter. It's still a cover-based shooter, but the more features they add to the game... Oh, they left. Okay. The more features they add to the game, the more it started to feel like every other AAA game out there. And I used to love Gears of War, like the original Gears of War 2. I loved this game. And more and more, like, 3 was all right. It was the ending, right? So there was a lot of sad, a lot less funny. But Judgment, I didn't care for at all. I was meh on 4. There were certain levels I absolutely loved. But overall, it was okay. And then I'm feeling the same way about 5. And I realized, now that there's like marking enemies and, a pulse where you can see where enemies are, it just starts feeling more and more and more like an Ubisoft game, which is kind of the AAA standard now, I guess. And, I understand why AAA games are seeming more and more like each other. It's the same reasons that, blockbuster movies are now all essentially the same structure. They're the same basic ideas over and over and over and over again. And that's when I started to think maybe AAA games just aren't for gamers like me. They're not for gaming connoisseurs the same way, the Olive Garden isn't for foodies and, stupid brainless movies aren't for film buffs. They're for the general population who doesn't really care if something's bad or good, just if it's entertaining. They don't mind seeing the same cliches over and over and over again. They go in wanting an element of, predictability. Don't challenge them too much. And it may just be that gaming as an art form and gaming as an industry is finally hit that level of maturity that we are going to have these mainstream products that people like me find derivative, because it's just bland and inoffensive, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just when you play games that are a lot more, I don't want to say a lot more thoughtful, because a lot of thought goes into making these games that are going to sell millions and millions of copies and appeal to a very broad audience. It's its own skill. But when you play a game with a very deliberate idea, it's a different experience. And basically AAA games for me come down to, do I like the main character? Do I like the story? Because most of the gameplay is the same. Like, if you've played one, you've played them all. So, except for something like Far Cry that is legitimately like the way everything goes bananas in those games, the sheer joy of playing them overcomes what can be a very mediocre story in the numbered games. Though I think Far Cry 3 is probably the exception to that. Loki, don't poop in my office. Thank you. We've been having a bit of an issue with Loki lately. But Loki the dog. But yeah, can you see up in Asgard? Like, Loki, don't poop in my office, said someone. Yeah, that was a weird non sequitur. Anyway, so like I really enjoyed the Spider-Man game. That was the last AAA game I played and really got into. I enjoyed Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but not as much as I enjoyed, say, Black Flag, or even, like, in its own way, I know this is weird, even in its own way, Assassin's Creed 3. No, it could be just be so many Assassin's Creed games. But, like, I really thought the Spider-Man game was an excellent game all around. But it had its own identity based on Spider-Man. So it was judged by a different standard. These games that don't have that really strong central character to pull you along, to sort of set unique expectations and overcome the blandness that infects AAA game development. I think that developers are kind of stuck because people, instead of people like me who like play a different game every other week, mainly because of Twitch and having to keep things interesting. But, you know, this is a completely different type of person. These are people who will only buy, you know, a few games a year, probably no more than 6. And they want to spend months and months and months and months on a single game. And it's just kind of like their you know, street hockey or backyard football kind of equivalent, that they like grinding in these games. They don't want to be too, I shouldn't say they don't want to be too challenged, but they want the challenge to be predictable, if that makes any sense, as opposed to, you know, you guys have seen the combination of, you know, very difficult modern games, which I think I like because they feel more like retro games back when games were hard, or the retro games, or weird little indie games. Some people on Twitch have really been pushing me to play Hollow Knight because I think I'll really like it, and since I'm mentioning it, you can tell I'm taking them very seriously, trying that one out. But yeah, those are different things. Those are, you know, even with flaws, there's a, wow, this is cool, like somebody tried to do something different kind of feeling to it. And I've always preferred games that took risks, even if that resulted in flaws. Or games that had deliberate flaws in them because, for instance, they were trying to sell game guides because they were trying to deal with piracy pre, you know, DRM. People saw me for entertainment purposes struggling through the final marble puzzle in Riven, that I still maintain is you need so many specific skills to complete that without a game guide. Most people do not have all the skills required. The thing that hangs me up on that puzzle is my problems with depth perception. So I have trouble reading the extruded 3D models, telling where the hell those grid lines are. And so I that's where I get hung up. If you don't have really great hearing, if you don't have certain pattern recognition, you're going to have a really hard time solving that stuff. But like I said, that was back when games were hard. And part of the joy was having a couple of friends who also played the games that you could get hints from, that you shared. That was the social experience of gaming before everything went onto the internet. Now you can't create that collective experience the same way because people can just look things up or you know, which you can choose not to do. Like I tried very hard when I was playing Sekiro to avoid strategy guides or game guides, in part because the ones I looked up were the opposite of helpful. I didn't find the official strategies for beating some of the bosses and sub bosses help me at all. They actually made me worse. I found my own way that worked for me. Again, depth perception thing. And I realized, like, wow, I've done pretty well with video games having such a real issue with the visual medium. It might be that I finally got proper corrective eyewear that helped with that some, but it's never going to completely take it away. The astigmatism's just too bad. But that's the kind of stuff games like, I'm playing this game called Elsinore, which is a retelling of Hamlet. You play as Ophelia. It's really out there and very kind of avant-garde theater. But it's neat. It's an interesting idea, and the way it utilizes a time loop, I find very clever. But yeah, I'm wondering if the problem isn't the game. It's not that Gears of War is not as good as it used to be. And it may very well be that. I have no idea. I'm just saying I'm not sure I'm in a position to judge it because I've changed in what I look for from games since the Gears of War 1, Gears of War 2 days. I've delved much more into the design elements of games. I have much stronger feelings about what interests me about games, and that something for everyone blandness that is required in a game to sell, 7 to 15 million copies, just doesn't appeal to me in the same way. A lot of sitcoms don't appeal to me, and a lot of, brainless blockbuster movies don't appeal to me. I've been very impressed at how consistently interesting those Marvel movies have managed to be, because man, Star Wars couldn't keep up the quality of those original ones. And see, that's the thing. Maybe AAA has gone from, the original Star Wars trilogy, episode 4, 5, and 6, and now they're more like episodes 7, 8, and 9, just cash cows, and you see the markers of that. Or maybe if I'd seen Star Wars episode 7 at the same point in my life that I saw Star Wars episode 4, I would have thought it was just as amazing. And I don't know. I really don't know. I'm curious as to what you guys think of this idea that AAA games just aren't for gamers anymore. We like the weird little niche games that, and has this follow-up question. One, do you think AAA games just aren't for gamers anymore? And two, do you think that because gamers are sort of tastemakers for games like Sekiro and Cuphead and games that are deliberately hard, the fact that people in the games press who think they're gamers but really aren't, do they have something of an imposter syndrome? And is that where this demand for an easy mode for all these games that were designed to not have an easy mode comes from? And by think they're a gamer but really aren't, I mean, and I say this just because I don't want this to be misconstrued, gamers are primarily interested in games as interactive experiences, and it doesn't necessarily require complex combos and stuff like that. Sometimes the nuance or novelty of narrative choice is just as appealing to gamers. There was a game that was a dating sim involving pigeons that people were telling me about on Twitch. I'm forgetting the name of it now. I'll remember it. Headful something. I don't play dating sims. But what is it? Headful boyfriend or something like that? I don't know. But yeah, it's a dating sim with pigeons. That is novel enough for gamers to go, that's interesting. I'm in. Something about that game appealed to them. Whereas somebody who thinks they're a gamer or aren't, or pretends to be a gamer because it's cool but really aren't, are primarily interested in character and story and approach something as if it is a story with button inputs as opposed to a game where the story basically creates a really interesting explanation of the rules or explanation of the purpose of the whole series of inputs. And like, to me with Cuphead, it's like you're fighting the devil. That's why it's so hard, because the devil freaking cheats. He's not going to make it easy for you. In Sekiro, they do this interesting thing about, you know, collective malaise and kind of a metaphor for, you know, how Sekiro was really brilliant this way, because it wasn't just another... This is a theme that is in a lot of Souls games, but Sekiro really touches on that Japanese idea of collective sacrifice and how it's a very heavy burden to be the person who matters, so everybody else has to suffer to prop you up because you have some skill that eventually benefits the collective, the country. And so everybody else is kind of suffering so that you can die over and over and over again, taking on this really difficult challenge. And it's even though the disease in the game is not really the problem you think it's going to be. It's easy to cure. There's enough dragons, the tears to do it. The sort of guilt and kind of weight of responsibility it psychologically puts on the player messes with your head, and you basically have to overcome it psychologically because it makes you suck. You have to relax and calm down and be methodical in the boss fights. You can't mash your way through. It's very hard to fluke a boss fight in that game. So that's really interesting design in that way. I really like the philosophy of that game, even if there's certain elements of the difficulty I thought were kind of cheese. But see, most people will listen to a conversation like this and kind of go eyes glaze over, the same way most people don't give a crap about art films or, you know, the intricacies and delicate flavors of French cuisine. They're good with the Olive Garden. What do you guys think? Is this just basically it? And we're sort of going to have to accept the not for us element of AAA games? Not like most of us care. I think us hardcores, we don't really feel left out if we're not into like Destiny or Battlefield or something like that. This is going to be the Feedback Friday topic this week. I expect really, really interesting comments based on you guys. I am curious about what you guys think. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this theory if it turns out to hold. But it's an interesting starting point. Asking the right questions is always important to getting the right answer. Okay. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Patreon. You should become a member. Thanks for watching.